And to speak in the terms that we're all knowing now so well, I had to figure out my why. Why was I going to coach? And when I stopped and thought about the billions and trillions of dollars that are spent on athletics, it had to be more than bragging rights. Athletics has to be more than being able to say, haha, we beat you. Athletics has to be more than the money that follows the winning. It has to. Sport teaches the really tough life lessons that our youth don't learn in the classroom. Sport teaches us how to be champions in life, that if we do that well enough as coaches and mentors, will translate to the competition.
Welcome to the 2020 Youth Sports Summit presented by LA84 Foundation and the Play Equity Fund. I'm Kevin Frazier, and as we continue our series of panels and discussions, today our conversation focuses on coaches who are creating conditions to help kids succeed, and not just in the sports that these young athletes are participating in. Outside of their parents, coaches often have a tremendous influence on young people when it comes to their love of sports and what their dreams are related to the sports they play, their goals in sports, and even in life. Now, those of us who have had an influential coach in our lives growing up never forget their names. And in this panel of the 2020 Play Equity Fund Summit, we'll learn how successful coaches create an environment that builds successful outcomes. Moderating this panel is Lolita Lopez, an investigative reporter and anchor from KMBC here in Los Angeles. You know, for the majority of her career, she has worked in the two largest broadcast markets in the U.S., Los Angeles and New York. And she graduated from Harvard University, where she was on the track and volleyball teams. Welcome, Lolita, who, by the way, is joined by a panel of coaches with a lot of background and insight on building successful programs and futures for young people.
Thank you, Kevin, so very much. And thanks to everyone for joining us for LA84's Foundation and the Play Equity Fund Youth Sports Summit. You know, this series of online broadcasts really has given us an opportunity to reach a wider audience than in years past when we would have met together on one evening in one place. So we're really excited for the participants in this particular online broadcast because they're just an amazing group that spans all kinds of age groups, from professional to Olympians to college and the youth that we so rely on today and for our future. So today's panel is about coaches who are creating conditions to help kids succeed. Again, I am Lolita Lopez, and as Kevin mentioned, I'm an investigative reporter for KNBC, that's the NBC here in Los Angeles, but I am also a former collegiate athlete, as he mentioned, and the daughter of a coach. My father was women's track and field coach at Rice University for more than 3 decades. He also coached Olympians and worked with the world body of track and field, the IAAF. My mother also participated after being a school teacher, and her work with gender equity in track and field led her to 2018 honors as Woman of the Year for IAAF. So strong coaching background in my life. I did a little coaching for youth volleyball as well, and helping my daughter's team, now a 16-year-old who plays. So for me, this means so very much to be a part of this conversation, especially with the people that we have. So joining me in this conversation, none other than Lisa Fernandez. She is UCLA's assistant softball coach and 3-time Olympic gold medalist. And honestly, it's softball equals Lisa Fernandez. She is a member of the Softball and UCLA Athletics Hall of Fame, and she's beginning her 23rd season on the Bruin staff. She's also, most importantly, the mother to 2 young sons. So Lisa, thank you so much for joining us.
Super excited to be here.
Awesome. Also on the panel is Keith Johnson. Keith is the president of the Falcons Youth and Family Services Organization, which he founded in 2007. Through sports-based youth development and other educational programs he has created, Keith has reached thousands of kids and helped provide focus and build character. And once you learn more about his organization, you're going to see just how he does it. Keith, thank you so very much for joining us as well.
Glad to be here.
Awesome. I'm also thrilled to join another person who is synonymous with the sport, women's water polo, Adam Krikorian. He is the women's senior national water polo head coach, and Adam has led his team to dominance, really. Gold medals in the 2012 and 2016 Olympics, and has also won 18 NCAA national championships as a player, assistant coach, and head coach while at UCLA. I kind of see a little bit of a theme going on here. Adam, thanks so much for joining us as well.
Honored to be here. Thank you.
Awesome. And last but certainly not least is a young lady who I feel like I have seen grow through the LA84 Foundation, the opportunities that the foundation has given her. She has taken and just run with it. Our fourth panelist today is Serena Lima. Serena is 2018 Coaching Corps Coach of the Year and a pre-law fellow. Serena is a basketball coach who has served low-income communities in Los Angeles to provide equal opportunity for youth to gain the benefits of sports. Her coaching of boys and girls ages 6 to 18 has reached beyond the court, including to teach them how to use their voices to speak up against injustices. And in this climate that we are in, that is oh so important. Serena, thanks so much for being with us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. You know, coaches are a bunch of different things. And, you know, growing up with a coach at home, I've realized that from a very early age. It's not just about leading on and off the court, but really it is about understanding the individual athletes, the individual person that they have in front of them, and really leading them to a future, right? To use their sport and where they are and where they can take that in anything that they do in life. So I'm going to begin with that question. So, you know, when we look at the balance of coaches between helping their athletes do well on and off the court or field or wherever they play, and then also understand that coaches are role models, that they're there to help build up an athlete and help them through maybe some challenges that they're having in life, and whatever they're going to do in their further career, also helping them through that. What is your greatest challenge in being able to balance that, and just what is the significance of a coach to you, Lisa?
Well, that's the greatest thing about coaching is the impact you can have on the young lives that you deal with. And, you know, to be able to help them develop their life skills is really how helpful sports can be. There's so many things that they can learn about life simply by playing the sport that they love. And as a coach, you were a direct liaison into being a resource for them. There are some difficult challenges. You know, there's the pressures of the game, there's the expectations of the game and how they manage that, but also some of the things that they have to deal with off the court or off the field. And so to me, that's what makes this job so special is when you can tap into the individual, help them be able to overcome some adverse challenges. Many, you know, a lot of it has to do with confidence, belief in themselves, giving them the freedom to be able to appreciate being able to fail, knowing that through failure is when they can achieve their greatest success. And to me, that's an important key factor for anybody who is growing up, especially during these times, is to be able to be fearless in their pursuit of their dreams and of their goals. And it's so rewarding as a coach when you can really tap into that individual, and everybody's different. You know, you be able to have those conversations, get to know the individual, and figure out how that individual is motivated. Not everybody is motivated the same way. And so that is a challenge as a coach, is being able to figure out how you can really get into the individual athlete and really tap into their greatness.
And Adam, for you, when you deal with the young ladies that you deal with, they're already professionals. They're doing other things as well. In that respect, you know, with these Olympians who are already so amazing, right? They've kind of reached this pinnacle. What are the challenges that you see and you face in coaching?
Yeah, well, I think they are amazing, obviously, but at the same time, to say that they don't have the same problems and issues that everyone else does would be naive. I think you know, one of the challenges as a coach, kind of going off of what Lisa was talking about, is we all have our own issues, our own anxieties, our own challenges. So balancing those issues, being aware of them on an individual level for us, and how that relates and connects to our athletes. And as you said, Lolita, just being a good example for them. But even our most professional athletes, Olympic team level athletes, you know, our age range is anywhere from 18 to 30 years old. And I think when they're going through this journey of an athlete and life, and this goes for anyone, whether it's in sport or not, is one of the challenges is just trying to discover and define who they are and what they believe in and what they stand for. And I can't help but to think I'm even going through that process still. You know, I'm 46 years old. So I think one of our goals and one of the challenges as a coach is helping them define, again, who they are, what they stand for, what they believe in, and that gives them more confidence when they're able to get to that point of really kind of defining, again, who they are. I think they're able to handle things, adverse things, much easier.
You make such a good point too, because I think just in sports, you see some people like winning awards and doing well, and you think that everything is just perfect and the world is great for them, and understanding their challenges throughout actually makes a person feel better. I remember my daughter talked to an Olympian she went to go see, and they were signing autographs, and she said, "What advice do you have?" And she's like, "Remember, it's a game. The game you play is the same game that I play. We just play it at different levels, but it's a game." And to find some love in that, right, in the play itself. Keith, coming along what Adam said is about kind of finding yourself and understanding who you are. And you deal with some young individuals in communities where that may be tough to do. What is your challenge in coaching in at that level and with those young folks?
One of the challenges that we really have is just helping them identify who they are, as opposed to what they have been labeled, and help them really begin to grasp that. So we do a lot of work with just helping them understand who we are as a people, what our strengths have always been, what we always bring to the table, and what they see now is not really who we are. So we wanted to find some inner confidence and some inner strength from that aspect. Then we have to separate this whole competition thing that's taking place in youth sports. Believe it or not, they're actually ranking youth football players at the age of 6 and 7 years of age, the number one running back in the country, the number one wide receiver. You're 6 and 7. So the goal is really to understand who you are. And right now, what you're doing is simply having fun. That's all we're doing. Now, we play to win, but winning is not the objective. The objective is to play to learn the game. And so it's just really, really important to kind of just set aside all the foolishness that adults bring to the table and just let the children play. And then when they're off the field, help them understand who they are so that they can understand that their real role in society is to benefit, that society should benefit from their presence and not suffer from it.
I giggled a little bit about the foolishness of adults, because sometimes I do see that, and we'll get to that later on down, of how we can help you as parents and guardians and adults to make it easier for coaches down the line. But Serena, I want to get you involved too, because you're a young lady, you've been through your ups and downs within your own athletic challenges and how you've dealt with that. How did you take some of that into your own coaching skills for these younger players?
Yeah, so I mean, I think what you're referring to is the fact that I, tore my ACL. I tore my ACL senior year of high school, so I couldn't play senior year. And so that's what got me involved in coaching. So I took that, mentality and that perseverance of, just not wanting to give up, and knowing that I love the sport so much and I wanted to get back into things and teach kids how much I loved it, because, there's so many life skills that you can learn from it. And it helped me get through the roughest times in my life. And, I know going into the community, I knew that I was going to be coaching kids that are going through a lot at home. And, that was one of my challenges being a coach in Ramona Gardens. Like, I love the community, don't get me wrong, but, there are, gang violence and, just exposure to drugs and, alcohol and so many different things in the community. And, I had to go in and understand that, I didn't grow up with so many, different curveballs coming my way, I guess. I grew up in a 2-parent household. And so, knowing that these kids were growing up with so many adversities, that was one of my challenges, was growing to understand that, and knowing that I pushed and persevered through something really, really challenging in my life. And I knew that, taking those skills and teaching them how to apply those skills to their own life and, get through those things. And, knowing that the basketball court was going to be their safe haven, knowing that the basketball court was going to be their outlet, and teaching them how to really just funnel all that energy into the court and into something honestly really quite beautiful, was one of the things that I learned to do over the course of my time coaching. wasn't easy at first because, there was a lot of, not wanting me to be there and, asking like how long was it going to take before they could get me to quit. But I never quit. I mean, eventually I did, when I like moved on to different things, but like, I didn't quit on those kids. I still talk to those kids to this day. And I still, reach out even during these times, like, I'm still reaching out to these kids knowing that, the skills that they learned on the court can help them get through these really like weird, stressful, and unprecedented times.
Yeah, no, it's the ability to just be there for them, right? And to have that, I still talk to my college coach, some 20 plus, I'm aging myself years later, and I call her Coachy. Like that's the way we still talk to each other to this day. And, sometimes it's just going to find someone who knows you in a way that can just be like, hey, you're cool and you're fine with whatever challenges you're dealing with. So, and you talk about challenges, and let's, the elephant in the room, right, is COVID-19 and this pandemic that we are all dealing with. My condolences to anyone who has lost or had some difficulty with this throughout this entire process. But coaching in the time of COVID has either magnified or really changed the role of a coach. So, there's no activities, there's no competition, the Olympics are postponed, and you really just have to pivot to be able to make something work. Adam, how have you kept your team engaged during this time with so much change and so many restrictions?
Well, I think the first thing I should say is it's been extremely difficult. It's not an easy task, and to say I've done it really well, I think I'd be lying to you. We're all adjusting. For us, we haven't spent any time talking about water polo literally in 4 or 5 months. So it's been a little bit of a deeper dive into kind of who we are. One of the issues what I see in today's athlete, anywhere from the youth level to the Olympic level, is just the stress and anxiety seems to be increasing. And then you add COVID to this, mental health, the importance of mental health, the stigma that's around mental health that needs to go away. I mean, these are the things that we try to talk about and discuss as a coach and as a team. I think many times we speak, and generally we speak and we hear about how there's so much anxiety and we need to lessen the anxiety. Well, I don't really personally look at it that way. For me, I think about we need to talk about the anxiety more, and we need to learn to manage the anxiety. I think for us it would be naive for us to believe that the anxiety is just going to go away. So we try to break down those walls and those barriers as much as we can, and that's what we've tried to do over the last few months, and successfully sometimes, but also unsuccessfully, and being okay with that moving forward.
And it's also, people have had to make some hard decisions about what they want to do. Do they play? Do they keep moving forward? I can imagine just on the college coaching level, Lisa, that you must see that just with the athletes that you have, those that are coming in, and how have you been able to deal with all of this change?
Yeah, it's been difficult. We did have 2 Olympians, Rachel Garcia and Bubba Nichols, who gave up a year in order to partake in the Olympics, got their year back. We have all the returners who got the COVID-19. We're able to come back and get another year so that this year can be replayed. And we have incoming freshmen. So we have a large roster of athletes that are going to try to figure it out. I mean, I agree with Adam in terms of being able to address issues. And, one of the first things we did was, put everything out on the table. Communication with our team is critical, and being able to help these kids manage. I think that's one of the biggest things, is really teaching these athletes and really kids in general on how to manage adversity, not to run away from it, not to hide from it, but to address it, and to be able to learn how to be able to deal with such difficult circumstances. They're going to be faced with some incredible challenges throughout life, and learning how to deal with them. And so being able to be in constant communication with them, as Adam said, not a lot of it is revolved around sport. But it's just really to be there as a resource for them to be able to freely be able to bounce off information and be able to bounce off thoughts of things that may be conflicted, or some of the things that they are dealing with emotionally, and doing the best we can from a coach's perspective to be a role model to try to help them through it and to be able to get through these difficult times.
Yeah, and to understand that it affects everyone. Like it affects
Absolutely.
It affects you at home, it affects us, and that not anyone is immune from sort of that, especially in the youth level too, right, Keith? Because you have now like parents trying to figure out what to do with their children. There's, work from home, who's working, who's not, who may be getting sick. Keith, in your communities, what are you seeing in terms of trying to keep engaged, try to keep these young kids playing sports, or trying to find that even as an outlet in this difficult time?
Well, it's really like Adam said. We've talked very little about football in and of itself. The real challenge is really trying to make sure that they have the resources that they need, as well as the people in their lives to help them get through this whole distant learning thing. Making sure that they're actually studying, making sure they're actually online, and then also with us, we work with our babies during the critical hours between the 5 and 7, 5 and 8 p.m. And so we knew where they were. We knew they were at a safe place. And so now we have to check up on our kids and make sure, okay, you're not in the streets. What are you doing? Who are you hanging with? What type of activities are you trying to do to keep yourself busy? Fortunately for us, we received some funding, and we kind of turned our warehouse, which is a very large open space, into a fitness center. So we bring some of our kids in and socially distance and working with them on that aspect. But really right now, it's just making sure that they're actually getting their education that they need, making sure that they have Wi-Fi, making sure they have computers or laptops or whatever we need to do to make sure that they have that skill set. And to be honest, help mom and dad out. Because I'm gonna be real clear, this new math has me pulling my hair out, and you can see I don't have any hair at all anyway. So really it's just about keeping track of them and making sure that they can stay on point as much as possible during these rough times. Some of our kids are actually playing travel ball, which is, no, I'll just leave that alone. But some of our kids are playing travel ball. They're traveling to different states. And obviously their parents can afford to do that. But for most of our kids, that's not an option for them.
Right. And so then what you can do is just make sure that they're doing well at home, at school, and then sports sort of follows with that in a way.
Correct.
Right.
That is correct.
Yeah. And I know that LA84, the foundation, has kind of used this time to pivot themselves, providing, I think it's 120,000 pieces of play equipment across 60 sites. That's balls and jump ropes and paddle tennis, just little things that maybe could be good de-stressors, right? When life is taking over, or the school and everything is kind of coming down on some of these kids. And you're right, maybe even the parents. I found myself during this COVID time when we couldn't leave anywhere, just peppering, it's a volleyball term, out in the yard with my daughter. One ball, us two, just trying to, de-stress mentally with all of that. And Serena, I know that you talked about going into some of these underserved communities back in the day when you were coaching. How do you feel that organizations and coaches can really help, give access and exposure to children and just be sort of that link?
Actually, realizing that sports isn't just a luxury. Like it's not something that only rich kids should have access to. It's not something that should just get swept under the rug, or seen as something that is less important compared to other issues that we're dealing with right now. I understand the having inequities in education, and having, the overarching homelessness issue, and, why should we care about sports? When there's all these other things that, people are going through. And I really, truly believe wholeheartedly that, some of these issues could be solved with sports. There's so many studies that have been done that, show that athletes are, performing better in school, and, they have, better mental health, when it comes down to dealing with the things that they're stressed about, because, they have that outlet. And I think that, when organizations realize that all these things, can come together, intersectionally, if I may, you can see really good things happen. When I was working at the Boys and Girls Club, there was different programs happening, all at the same time. And, and you would see these athletes, when they would come together, they would be very well-rounded people. So I think that when, you bring these other resources to them, and, you make them well-rounded, and you give them the access and the exposure that they wouldn't otherwise have gotten. And you do that through the avenue of sports, a lot of things kind of just come together and fix themselves almost. And you see these kids grow to be really, really amazing people. There's so many kids that I can talk about all day long, and one of them that I'm really most proud of, he's starting his own business now. And I really think that because of sports, and because of the Boys and Girls Club giving him different ways to fundraise and, you know, put on different events for his community, you know, he learned just these different like tangible skills and like real life skills that he's like actually applying and, you know, putting towards his own future now. Like, you know, I talk to him about his goals all the time. And, you know, I think back to like, you know, when I would, you know, coach him and, you know, when we would work together, I'm like, wow, like, you know, he's come like such a long way. And I can only imagine if we had like really, really good resources that these other really affluent kids, you know, have access to, like, you know, immediately, or their parents can afford, you know, these other different programs to put them through. And so like, you know, when low-income communities and when, you know, underserved communities get that spotlight or, you know, that access and, you know, that realization that they're important too, you know, beautiful things can happen.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I feel like, I mean, sports for me is kind of like creating like another family too. I remember being in Boston, 3,000 miles away, and like the people that were easily accessible to me were my teammates and my coach, to be like, hey, I'm dealing with this, or I'm going through this. I mean, especially in this time, and I think everyone sort of touched on it, but I really want to talk about communication and how important it is in terms of being a coach and communicating, but especially now with how people are feeling about social injustices and COVID-19 and who we are as people, you know, in a very tumultuous time in an election coming up. Keith, let's start with you on that. I mean, how do you talk? I mean, I know you deal with some young folks, but how do you keep those communication lines open, you know, and sort of pivot around some of these really difficult issues?
Actually, it is a very difficult issue, but it's not a new issue to our community. I think a lot of people are waking up to the reality of what has taken place in Black and brown communities throughout the countries, not this year, but for decades. And so those are conversations that we've always had about, you know, how do you make sure that you stay safe, and not only from people who look like you, but also from people who, for the most part, are good people, but some may not necessarily protect you as well as they should. You know, so we have to teach those kids those skill sets. It does not come as a surprise when we hear that a police officer, for whatever reason, has choked someone out. It does not come as a surprise when we hear that a police officer, for whatever reason, has shot someone. That does not come as a surprise. And unfortunately, I think many of our people, our young people, have come accustomed to it. And that's really a sad thing to say, that the shock value is gone, that it's almost casual. Did you hear that such and such got shot by the police? So that's what we have to talk about. That's not normal. That's not healthy. That's not who we are. That's not how the community should be. And so we purposely take field trips. I'll tell you this story really, really quick. Our youth football team years ago played in Mission Viejo. And we had vans, and when we got out of the vans, the kids looked around and they literally said, "Coach, it feels different out here." Like, what do you mean it feels different out here? Like, I don't know, Coach, it feels different. And I knew immediately what they felt. And I said, look around and tell me what you don't see. What is it that you do not see? And they looked around and I said, how's it different? They have houses, we have houses, they have cars, we have cars, they have grass, we have grass. How's it different? And one kid said, "Coach, I don't see any bars on their windows." And I'm like, yeah. So you know what you're feeling? You're feeling free. Because in our community, everything that we're engaged in is behind bars. We look out of our windows in our homes, we're behind bars. We go to the banks in our communities, we're behind plexiglass. We go to the stores and there's bars and plexiglass. So the first time in your life, you're in an environment where subconsciously you feel free. And I think that's a challenge that we have with our young people, helping them understand that you're not going to be a prison in your mentality for life. And we must help them understand what it feels like to be free. That's our real challenge.
Yeah, and Lisa, you know, you as a player, I remember you being very outspoken when softball was taken out of the Olympics, and just in other ways that you have been sort of a provider of a real voice of not just for your sport, but also who you are as a human being and as a person. How do you talk to your athletes about having that balance during this time?
Yeah, it's been a lot of communication and being able to express everybody's differences and everybody's experiences, and not to be judgmental of other people's points of view, but to be able to have an open mind, to be able to be a good listener and a learner about what is going on in the situations that we're in. I think it's really important that people be able to have their own perceptions, to be able to understand and how they can make a difference in some of the things, and to have a voice in terms of their opinions and of their thoughts. And it's something that obviously I've taken close to heart. I'm Hispanic, obviously, as a female, trying to be a role model of how to be able to create opportunities, but also being able to learn how to support and be available as a coach to my athletes during this difficult time of being able to understand some of the circumstances that are going on around them.
And UCLA for you, and Adam for you as well, because of your connection, has been sort of, very strong in folks who've come through, who have been able to speak about social injustices and other prominent issues. This is the 60th anniversary of Rayford Johnson's gold medal win in Rome. And when I think of Rayford Johnson, I think of all of the tremendous things that he gave to the community that had to deal with sports, but really it was just beyond that. When I think about the Olympics too, about a place where anything is possible. But in this time when we are still trying to get to that place after the postponement and everything like that, there are moments that athletes are having right now. So Adam, is that something that you're communicating with your folks? And how are you doing that? And any advice for coaches out there who may need to be able to speak to their players and even their parents about the moment that we're in?
Well, a lot of it's going to depend on who you are. I think every situation is a bit different. This may go against a bit of your question, but for me personally, someone who is considered to be white, of Armenian descent, who am I to speak about what is going on? For me, sometimes the best thing a coach can do is just shut up and let other people speak. So I think the goal for me more has been to educate myself, to be an example of education, to be an example of sometimes being quiet and listening to others, or just asking questions to create conversation. I'm not in a position to, as frustrating and as sad as it is to see some of the things that are happening in our society, I'm not necessarily in a position to lecture about that. I'm in a position to listen and to educate myself. So that's really been my focus. And it doesn't mean I'm not saying things at times. I'm still a leader and for this team and for our sport, but there's times to speak, and there's also times to stop and to listen and lend an ear.
And I think that might be one of the most amazing sort of bottom lines. People do forget to listen and to learn and to absorb and to have communication with folks who you may not even think alike with, but you learn something just by having a discussion together. So as a supporter, I feel like that's one of the things that we may lose the most in sort of these conversations we have. So Adam, really well said, because sometimes it's just about listening and about trying to figure out where we are right now in this world, in our different spaces. Especially when I look at coaching too, I look at just who is there and who we see, right? And I think in terms of diversity, it's always been a good thing. Women, we talk about like women in high prominent head coaching roles. The Tucker Center for Research on Girls and Women in Sports, their newest report said that the trend is going up, but that it's stagnant and that it has a way to go. And some of it might just be that critical zone of assistant coach, where there's a moment where, women are having children and maybe moving and progressing, and that's just a difficult time to sort of move on forward. So Lisa, I wanted to take this to you because we talk about bringing in more people of who we are, who we see in our society, and bringing them into some of these coaching roles. Tell me about the things that you've had to deal with, and also any advice that you have, especially as a mother of 2 young sons.
Yeah, it's doable, definitely. I am an assistant coach. I've made a decision because as Adam knows, sometimes when you're a head coach, it kind of pulls you in a different direction. I'm definitely more an X's and O's type of person, and I love being on the field, and I love being able to work really one-on-one with the athletes. But it's capable, you're capable. And that to me is, our head coach is Kelly Inouye Perez, also another mom that has a son who's actually at UCLA and has a daughter who is a sophomore in high school. And so we walk the walk. We talk to our athletes. We are an example of being able to be strong females who are able to do it all. And I think that's all we can do, is be a resource once again for these kids to be able to communicate and be able to use us as a guide in being able to achieve those dreams. We encourage our athletes, play as long as you can, stay in the sport as long as you can. It's important to be able to love. If you have the fortunate opportunity to be able to work and love what you do, that is the greatest reward. And so, really it's just being able to know they can do it all.
Absolutely, and also supporting. I feel like that word has come up a lot in our conversation today about supporting coaches that are doing it at a youth level or as volunteers, or helping these kids, really early on at young ages to just find the small skills that then you can lead on. And I'm sure, Keith, a lot of people who come to your organization to help, to be there to do it, but they're underpaid. Sometimes they're underserved, and that's difficult. So I want to start with you on the last one, because I think there's a responsibility for parents like myself, guardians, or anyone who have their children in any type of sports, or their young women and men, and even in professionals. What can we do to help our coaches? And Keith, I'll start with you.
Let me back up for 1 second and cover something. We talked about engaging our kids. I have to tell a story because I want it to spread. My wife actually took our 16-year-old granddaughter and taught her how to play jacks. She was bored out of her mind, and they played jacks, and they went live on Facebook. And as a result of that, we now have an upcoming schedule. Like I said, we have a big warehouse where we're going to have a mother and daughter jack night, where they're teaching them how to play jacks and pick up the ball and throw it in the air, and everyone loved it. And I think one of the things we can do with our kids at home is let's go back to some of those old school games that we used to play before they were video games, and really engage our kids. It was funny because my wife, I won't name her age, she was on her nines. And if you know anything about jacks, she was on her nines. My 16-year-old well-coordinator dancer granddaughter could not get past her twos. So it was simply hilarious, and they had a ton of fun. And I just think maybe we should go back and doing some of those old games that we played with our kids. As it relates to parents, you know what parents can do? First of all, on the way home, ask their kids, first of all, do they have fun? What did they learn at practice today? And what do you want to eat? And then let the kid go home and leave it alone. Let the coach be the coach. Let the parent be the parent. Let the parent be the biggest cheerleader that they possibly can be. And just understand, when the plumber comes to my house, I don't try to do plumbing. When an electrician comes to my house, trust me, I don't try to do the electrical work. Let the coach do what they do and offer the word of encouragement, offer the word of support. Be there not only to help your kids, but also find out what the coach may need. Bring some water, bring some snacks. But at the end of the day, don't let the ride home be a long ride home. Let it be a peaceful ride home, and let the coach be the coach and you be the parent. And I think that would help a coach out tremendously.
And snacks are always key. Noted. That
Yes.
was really well said. Serena, do you have some advice too, especially with the communities that you've served in the past, where maybe there's not that one adult that you can go to? What are some things that communities or anyone can do to help these young athletes?
I think that bringing in some sort of resource for the coaches to get trained too, because I think when the coaches are trained, correctly, and they understand how to, talk to the youth, and how to, be there for the youth, and how to understand and really listen to the youth, and, what they're going through. I think, bringing these different trainings, and I know LA84 does trainings, Coaching Core does trainings. And so when the coach comes in, not fresh and not knowing what to do, they could just be scared away because of how difficult things may be. And usually in my experience, there wasn't a lot of parent involvement when I was coaching. There wasn't a lot of people in the stands sometimes, supporting their kids. A lot of parents work, a lot of parents, or they just weren't there. I don't really know why sometimes. And but when the parents were there, there is very few. There's one that comes to mind, and she has several kids, and all really, really young. All of her kids would participate in the program, and it always made me feel really good whenever she would say good job, coach, or just be really supportive. And just seeing her in the stands and rooting for her kids just would make me feel good. So I think just showing up for your kids is whenever you can, especially if it's a weekend, and supporting the kids makes just seeing somebody supporting them as much as I support them makes a difference in my mind. And seeing them being happy, oh my god, my mom's here, and there was a couple of times where like, the kids would ask like, my dad's here at this game, like, can I play more? And I would, of course, I let them play because, I didn't know the next time their dad was going to be there or their mom, so I think just having that parental support and, like you said, Keith, like, giving them like, a snack or like a water and, just reminding us that we're doing a good job sometimes, even if we lose and, sometimes I know it is on me, but, there are like, times where it's like, one after another and after another where you just really feeling defeated and like, like it's your fault. But, just having those other people who also work at the center that you coach at and, just having that like support system of being able to turn to somebody when things just aren't going your way is, I think, what makes all the difference for me, because that's what I had. I had people like, constantly reassuring me that things were going to get better, especially after my first and my second season when I was barely getting to know the kids. There was people always encouraging me to like just keep going and just to change my strategy. And, little by little, when the kids started coming around towards my coaching, like, things got better. So just having that overall support and, that constant reminder that, you're doing good work and you're really making a difference. And people are noticing, a difference in these kids and how much happier they are and, how much better they're doing in school and how much more encouraged they are to be involved in the sport and be involved at the center that you're coaching at. So yeah, it all just starts with that support system and having a really strong foundation in that.
Absolutely. Support and snacks, it seems, are leading the way. And Adam, I know it's a different athletic group, right? You have different athletes. They're not young and coming from certain communities. But for you, what would be helpful in terms of like the idea of what a coach is, or how we see our coaches and who they are to not just their athletes, but to the audiences that view them and that watch them for entertainment and for the love of whatever the game is?
Well, we're depending on the position you are. I mean, for me personally, it's, I view myself as a representative of not just our team, but our sport, our community that we live in. And then on the larger scale within the United States Olympic movement, and then even the world movement. So we speak, and this isn't just for me, it's for everyone that's associated with our program. We speak about representation all the time and how we want to represent ourselves. And we certainly, one thing that you see nowadays is kind of almost this fake representation of themselves. There's some authenticity that we want to bring to the table through that process, but we want to be example for the youth. I know I speak again on behalf of my entire team. I think one of the great thrills that we have is that when we know that we've inspired young coaches or young athletes to further themselves, whether it's to be an Olympic coach or an Olympic athlete, great. But if it's not, it's just about furthering themselves as athletes and as human beings and as positive role models in our society. So when we get that opportunity, we try to take advantage of it. And that really probably gives us more joy than any win that we could possibly have.
And I will say, your team has been instrumental really diversifying its athletes and reaching out to many different communities. But not only that, but when you win, you're really good at teaching the world about water polo. It's a sport that maybe not everybody sees at the Olympic level, but once you guys have it there, it's there. And there's some importance to that, right? That it's not just the traditional sports, but there are these other things. And there's a world to explore even in the sports world. It seems something that you guys have done really well.
Well, that's good to hear. We try to spread the love of our sport as much as possible. It's unknown a bit, but it's a really difficult and challenging sport. One that I always say is like the easiest sport to quit, which is one of the reasons why I love it. I actually never wanted my kids to play water polo because I was just around it all the time, right? It's like the last thing I want to do is go from practice to watching my kid play, in a practice or in a game. But as I kind of grew older and became a little bit more mature, I realized that it's a wonderful sport because you are failing all the time and you're forced to kind of deal with adversity really on a daily basis. And there's so many lessons to be learned through that. So the more we can spread the love of water polo, obviously in sport in general, I think the better the world will be.
Same thing, some love spread to softball as well, right?
Yes.
Lisa, as we're moving on and to all of these things. And I mean, it's an interesting thing that Adam said about, his children. You have two sons, you try to engage them as well. You're trying to be a coach and a mother and a role model. I mean, that's a lot. That's a lot for one person to deal with. So I mean, for the parents around, for the world in general, just how we see coaches, what we should expect from them. What would you advise just people on who coaches are and how we can help?
Yeah, I mean, we wear, many of us wear many hats. And so, obviously someone who gets into the coaching environment is someone that truly cares about the youth. And right, wrong, or indifferent, not everybody's perfect, but hopefully each coach is doing their best to do what they feel is right by an athlete. And, some coaches are better than others. And I think it's important that parents do a little research, but also to have the support and patience, and communication is key. Being able to teach athletes how to communicate to their coaches is going to be a valuable skill that these kids are going to need to learn later on in life. And I couldn't agree more with Keith about the support of parents is huge. And if you don't have parents that are accessible, being able to find mentors, one of the things that we like to do with our Bruins is have them reach out and give back to the kids so that they can have some type of communication with the younger athletes and be mentors for them. It's important to know that sports is difficult. It's not an easy task. As Adam expressed, there are some physical challenges. I can't imagine being in water polo and have to tread water for as long as they have to tread water. In softball and baseball, the hardest thing to do is to hit a round object with a round object when you think about being able to be in the box with the pressure on you. So there's a lot of mental stress that's also involved in pressure. When the game is on the line, can you hit the last second shot, and how a kid manages that? No kid wants to fail. And so to be told that they could have been better, obviously, it's how are you going to help them recover? And that to me is so important, is to be able to create action plans, to be able to support an athlete, an individual, even if they're not in athletics, but really to be able to create how they deal with adversity, to create action plans about how they're going to move forward, to me is so important. And that to me is where coaching and parenting plays a huge integral part in any individual's development, because life is full of adversities.
Hey, Lolita, can I add something to that?
Absolutely.
The one thing that I've seen a bit that concerns me, but also gives me some hope with regard to coaches and coaching, is that it's becoming more professional and professionalized. It can be a positive thing. There's a lot more coaches nowadays who are getting paid for what they do on the youth level.
Yes.
And it's a positive thing in that, maybe their quote unquote success, however you define that, is going to depend on how much money that they make. And it forces them to be a little bit more professional, and be more educated in what they do. But the concern I have, and what I see, is that sometimes they're doing it for the wrong reasons. It would be great, and I would love to believe that we're all doing it for the right reasons, and we're all doing it for the youth. But that's not what I see at all times. And I'm a bit concerned that yes, it's becoming more professional, but it's important for every single coach, even on the professional level, to understand that the reason why we do this, hopefully, is to benefit our youth, and to guide them and to lead them and to be examples. It's not for the bank account. Yes, there are some coaches out there, maybe in the NBA or in the NFL, that are making a good amount of money, but a majority, 99% of the coaches in our country aren't making that much. It's not about that. So as we get more and more professional, let's still remind ourselves of the role that we play in these kids' lives.
Right. I'm glad you said that, because it's the why factor. And I remember my dad, calling all of his athletes his girls, and really taking an emphasis. He did not care. I mean, I think he made like $20,000 in his first coaching job, and it had nothing to do with it. As he went through, he still considers all of these young ladies that have come through him, just his part of our family. And doing it for the right reasons. And I remember him saying, even for me going into my profession, you do it for the right reasons. You don't just go be a reporter to be on television and look pretty and do all these things. I would never do that anyway, but there is that sort of underlying thing that I learned through sports and maybe through his coaching, both at home and on the track, that really inspired me. And Keith, I saw you nodding your head because it's really integral what Adam is saying to the coaching that happens at your level. Can you just add a little bit about how you see sort of the progress of coaching and making sure that that coaches are doing this for the right reasons?
So I think coaches really should be, in my opinion, mentors and role models for their kids. I think coaches have to understand who they are, what position is. Coaches carry a lot of social capital with our kids. There's 3 people in our community that kids listen to. Their pastor or their priest, gangs, and coaches. And I didn't even say parents, because if you raise kids like I have, oftentimes my children listen to other people far more before they listen to me. So coaches carry a lot of weight. A football coach can walk into a classroom and I'm not even the other kid's coach, and they'll immediately get to attention and do the right things and set up straight. And that's a lot of clout that you carry, a lot of influence that you carry. The question is, what are you going to do with that? We don't need bigger, stronger, faster kids. What we really need is kids who are self-aware, who they are, what they bring to the table, and be careful about the messaging that you give to our babies. So yes, I want coaches to learn the skill set and teach the skill set of the sport. More importantly, I learned this statistic from LA84, the average kid is going to participate in youth sports maybe 2.5 years. So you have 2.5 years to make a real impact on that kid. What is he going to leave with that will sustain him for the rest of their life? And it won't be how well he dribbles a basketball.
Absolutely. And well said. This has been such a tremendous sort of uplifting conversation to me, because it really is just about making us all better humans and reminding us that we are all sort of in this together. So we are done with our question part, but we still have more questions from people who want to know more about you all and the advice that we can get from you. So I'm going to move on now to the questions from our lovely audience and people who want to learn just a little bit more about what you guys all do. So I want to get to some questions from folks that have already written into us. And one of the ones is, how can those watching be allies in the work you do and in the work that LA84 and the Play Equity Fund does as well? And Serena, you've had a lot of work with both LA84 and just everything that they've been able to do. How do you think that those watching can be allies to you all?
Yeah, so people watching, I think one step that is absolutely critical is realizing how you can incorporate sports into what you do. If it's education, how can education and sports come together? If it's art and sports, how can those two come together? There's always a way to bring communities together and realize how important this work is. And I think getting involved with LA84 and the Play Equity Fund, LA84 has so many resources on sports and the state of youth sports in LA, and just doing your research and becoming aware of how important these things are. I think that's absolutely critical to being an ally and realizing that youth sports is not as accessible in low-income communities and in underserved communities, and it's not played at the highest level where travel ball is played at a different level, and you have different things there, and how do you bring all these resources to these communities, and how do you just educate yourself and learn about what's really going on in these communities? And when you start doing that and you start realizing that you grew up a different way, and the way your program runs is a completely different way, and why aren't you paying attention to these kids? So when sports gets taken away from you because of a pandemic, why aren't you as outraged when these kids haven't even had sports to begin with? So I think turning that light and turning that energy towards helping out others that don't have the same types of resources as you is one way you can be an ally. And like I said, just do your research, reach out to people who are knowledgeable about these kinds of things, and make sure that you know like what's going on in these communities, and just turn to LA84 for these resources, and their digital library and different things like that.
Right. It's like it's there. Go find it. Go see how you can support and help in any way that you can. There's another question for all of the panelists: is what role does sports play as kids transition into a new school year filled with distance learning? And I think, Lisa, you have it on both fronts, right? You have the two sons who are distance learning at home, and then you have your athletes, collegiate athletes, doing it as well. So, what role does sports play in helping with that transition?
It's been an interesting year. I mean, collegiately, obviously, we have some restrictions in terms of what we can do with them. With softball, obviously, at UCLA, for us, the priority is academics, and for them to be able to make sure they are handling that situation. Communication is huge. Some kids struggle with the distance learning and not being able to be in class, but being a resource, obviously, through athletics to be able to have another look or to be able to get some of that communication where they're able to be with other people is big. For my son, freshman in high school, not being able to be on an experience, he's a baseball player, so it's been a challenge for him. I mean, that was one thing that he has always looked for, is that opportunity to be a part of a high school team and to have that experience, to be with the guys and to be on the field. We've had to have some alternate means. Travel ball, as Keith had talked about, some of the kids are doing that. And really being able to take advantage of this opportunity and work on personal skills, to be able to go outside and play catch and figure out ways to be creative. My mom grew up in New York. She used to talk about throwing the ball up against the stoop and figuring out how to still be able to work on skills, even though you may not have a team environment. And so there's some creativeness that comes into play, but it is a challenge.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love the stoop ball. That's my father-in-law, who's from New York City as well, is like, just hit against the wall. What are you doing? What are you talking about? There's plenty to do here. Like,
yeah. Sports is a great outlet, but this COVID time is really, creativity is huge, and really learning how to be self-motivated, and being able to utilize resources that maybe are not customary, especially if you're always used to having a pitching machine or whatever, or access to it. How can you replace those things and utilize a wall, utilize just any type of backstop to be able to still work on your skills?
Yeah, during this time, April Ross, Olympian beach volleyball, was really great at like creating these things in her backyard, and a lot of kids would do it. And there was like this challenge, and they were like, if April can do it, we can do it. And it just became like a thing. And it was such a really interesting way. And I think some of the things we still use now, like hitting against the wall and a board and stuff. So you're spot on in terms of talking about just how like reinventing yourself and just going back to sort of that beginning of how we would have done it, 50 years ago.
Absolutely.
Keith, this one's for you. Do you believe that coaching kids in sports can heal racial tensions and division? If so, do you see that within your own programs? And what does play equity mean to you? That's three there. So let's tackle one at a time. Do you think sports can help with racial tensions?
Oh, definitely, without a doubt. Again, a couple of quick stories in regards to that. So several years ago, when we first started our youth football program, youth football was really predominantly African-American boys, and cheerleading was African-American girls. And so, but we live in a diverse community. I think it was maybe 50-50 as far as Latino and African-Americans. And so we really, really, really wanted to bring in our Latino kids to play youth football, tackle football. So we put the flyers out, and, English on one side, Spanish on the other side. And so it was a kid that wanted to stop at the table to sign up. And he was with his grandfather, and his grandfather was like, no. Fortunately, one of my coaches is a Hispanic male. And I said, Esteban, talk to the grandfather and ask, what's his concern? So the grandfather basically said, I don't see me, in broken English, I don't see me, meaning that I don't see my people with you. And so, again, Esteban spoke with him and told him that there was other Hispanic kids in the program, and they joined, and more Hispanic people joined. And you know what happened? We discovered that we had more in common than we had in difference. And our program actually became one of the most diverse programs in the city of LA with that mixture. But also being in team sports, we also competed against teams in Orange County. And so again, we went to Dana Point, we went to Mission Viejo, we went to South Orange County. And in turn, those kids came to, as we would say, parentheses, the hood. And what they discovered was that it wasn't how big or how bad your house was or how fancy the car was. It was the fact that we all loved one another, that we all We took a hit, we hurt like one another. We laughed like one another, we cried like one another, we won, we lost like one another, and we began to understand one another's culture. And that's important because at the end of the day, you can't understand someone until you get to know them. And that's exactly what sports did. Back when it was safe, we also had times when we would travel up to Oakland, California. Believe it or not, I know this sounds like crazy, our kids would go stay with the other parents' kids. And then when the kids came to LA, those kids would come stay with us. And these were different cultures and different racial groups. That created a bond and a sense of trust that you would never see before. So yes, sports can definitely heal the racial tensions only because you get a chance to discover one another and know that we have more in common than we have in differences.
Yeah, but to be sincere, there are disparities, especially your kids will see it when they go to those different communities. So there is an equitable situation that we see just on the face of it, who has certain equipment and who doesn't have. So how can we make play more equitable, and what does play equity mean to you?
Well, for me, play equity means giving kids access and the ability to play on an even field. How do I say this? Mike Tyson did not come to the ring with the fancy robe and the fancy socks. He came to the ring with just what he had. And he came with just what he had, and he made the best of what he had. The reality of life is that sometimes kids are going to have more than others are going to have. We just took I need to get away from everything, and we took a drive up the coast. We went through Malibu, and oh my God, there was some beautiful homes. And my granddaughter's like, "Papa, how much is that home?" And I'm like, "That's probably about $85,000." It was $125 million. Are you kidding me? So when I got back to my little house on 91st Street in Los Angeles, I was grateful for the fact that I had a home to live in. And so we just have to teach our kids. And I understand play equity and quality sports and quality equipment, but sometimes we got to teach our kids we're going to use what we have, and we're going to make the best out of what we have, and we're going to make it happen with what we have, and not opposed to, well, I can't play because they have something better than me. No, this is what we have. This is what we're going to use. We're going to use it until we can get more.
Yeah. And a lot of it is that doesn't cost any money. It's in here and in here, right? It's mind and soul and heart that if you have enough of that, you can really move forward.
Right. Now, I'm going to be real clear. I'm not saying that we should always settle for that. I mean,
no, I get you.
As a director of a youth football program, a nonprofit, I constantly reached out. LA84 was wonderful for bringing in some things, wealthy donors, corporations, but we cannot let that be a reason why we don't play, simply because we don't have the Nikes or the Air Jordans. Listen, if you have Pro Kids or you got some cleats from Walmart, let's play this game.
Yeah. And also go find, the athletes in these communities, right? I remember my dad recruiting from Barbados and Jamaica when no one was recruiting in track and field. And have you seen the runners from Jamaica and Barbados? Right. They're pretty fast, but it's the idea that he went somewhere where no one else was looking. And I think that you make a really good point. It's like, we're here, we're available, support us, and you can see just how much more we could thrive, even though they're doing so well. This one is for all of that, but I want to give this one to Adam, because you touched on it a little bit in terms of coaching and who our coaches are and the why we coach kind of thing. And you have so many female athletes that are coming up and playing the sport, maybe perhaps even in yours, obviously with women's water polo, but then maybe not going on to coach or to do anything with that. Is there a way that you try to encourage any of your athletes who would be really great coaches and could, further, the lives and the sport for some young athletes? And how do you do that, especially with women?
Yeah, I'm always encouraging them to join the dark side, which is coaching. I just say that in all jokingly. Representation matters, and it's funny. I feel silly saying that because here I am as a male coaching a women's team, and to be quite frank, sometimes I feel guilty because I haven't necessarily walked in their shoes, but I do know that representation matters, and it's important for our athletes and our youth athletes to be able to see strong, independent women who are coaching to have as role models, because they walked in their shoes. And I think for me as a male coaching women, what I try to do is really for my athletes is just empower and encourage and instilling belief in them as powerful, independent, strong women whose voices need to be heard. I mean, I can't help but to think of Justice Ginsburg, right, who passed away just a few days ago, and what she say, women belong in places, in all places where decisions are being made. So understanding my role in hopefully, again, encouraging and empowering, instilling that belief in them to share their opinion and thought, and how much it matters, and how much it matters for young women who look up to them. I mean, I see it all the time. And this has been one of the really neat things, at least in our sport, is just, when I first started coaching women, there weren't too many younger women who looked up to the athletes that I was coaching. But every year that passes, there's more and more of these young kids, these young females who are ages, 4 to 18, who are just idolizing our athletes. And it's a unique opportunity. And the more that I can't force them to be coaches, but just understanding the power, and I say that in a positive way, not in an authoritarian way, the power and the impact that they can have as coaches is important. And I know that they've enjoyed, and I try to point out those times in which they're impacting our youth, so they can see that and take pride in it. And then hopefully down the line that they choose to join the dark side, as I said.
The dark side and the good side. And I will say you should be guilt-free, because that's the type of conversation that we need to have, because we're not anything if we don't have support. And this has nothing to do with sports, but we moved from New York City to Los Angeles for my career, and my husband left everything behind, and he stopped his production. He left everything to start brand new for me. And if I don't have that support, we wouldn't be here 9 years later. So I feel that with, like, the support that you have from not just your partners, but your community. Lisa, you're walking the walk. You're a coach there. You've been doing it for a long time. You know that it is not easy. How do you encourage others to try to get spots like yours?
Coaching is it's not for everybody. But if you have the gift and you have the drive, I think Adam talked about it. It's not about the money. There are very few that actually do extremely well. We know that. But there's a lot of us that do it simply because it's what we love to do. And I think it's all about the support. It's about being able to know and be able to help these women realize they can do it all. It doesn't have to be one or the other. It takes administrative support. I've been blessed to be able to travel my family on the road and to have that encouragement. To be able to know that I can do it. And I want to express that to all the women out there who have a drive and a desire to want to make a difference in this coaching world, which they can. They can impact some incredible youth in helping develop these people to be successful. And they may not be pro athletes, they may not be Olympians, but if they succeed in life, it is so worth it. And so really it's about that support and knowing that you can do it and surrounding yourself. The publicity that's been expressed through the women's athletics and in the professional leagues and the Olympics also brings light to being able to have the 4, 5, 6, 8-year-olds, 10-year-olds that can look at Rachel Garcia and go, man, one day I want to be just like her. And even if she's not an All-American or Player of the Year, she's going to be a great individual simply by playing this game.
Oh, Rachel Garcia, absolutely, just the best. And you're right. The social media has been really helpful in being able to see these athletes as real people and what they do in real life. And that's really just encouraged some young players to be like, we can be like you. We can be in some way.
They can be all they dream of being.
I love it. So we have a final one for everyone. We just have a few minutes left in our panel. I'll start with you, Lisa, since we're here already. Why are you passionate about teaching life skills through sport?
I know what it's done for me. I mean, the skills that I've learned about life through simply playing the sport that I love, failure, success, camaraderie, being able to work with other people has just been tremendous. I probably learned one of my most valuable skills, being able to overcome. I was on the track at UCLA and I was working out with Byron Scott, Laker basketball player, and I was actually his rabbit, and he was chasing me, around the track at UCLA, working on his dribbling skills. And I get done, and of course, Adam, when you work out so hard, you might get a little sick, and here I, end up throwing up, and I think we're done with the workout, and they're like, we're not done. We got more to do. Are you okay? And I'm like, well, I got a little sick, and they're like, awesome, you've made it. Let's go. You've got more in you. I'm like, okay. And I kept going. And it was when I realized how strong your mind is. You're strong, the strength of the mind is very important in terms of confidence and belief and how powerful it is. And so to me, I'm a huge advocate of using sports to be able to learn life skills.
Adam, and you?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of us, Lisa said it, but I think most of us do it because we were impacted on some level. I mean, the most inspirational people in my life, other than my parents and my brothers, were my coaches. And we just want to give back what we received. And, on another level, and this isn't for every sport, maybe because some sports are individual, but there's nothing like, and Keith kind of touched on it a little bit, there's nothing like team sports and what it teaches in terms of working with other people who have different personalities and come from different backgrounds and may look a little different or have different preferences. And, you don't really learn that stuff so much in school as much as you do in sport. And I learned a ton through my experiences, and I just want to pass it forward.
Absolutely. And Keith and Serena, close us out here, your passion, why you do it, and why you think it's so important. Keith, we'll start with you.
Real quick, today, Amazon truck rolls up, guys delivering a ton of packages that my wife ordered. Yes, I said that. But it was one of my former players. And I'm like, how are you doing? He's like, I'm you know what? I'm making it. I have a job. I'm married. I'm taking care of my kids. I'm working, and I'm making it happen. And we had some other conversations, but at the end of the day, I'm passionate because here's a young man that could have fallen through the cracks, but he's out there, and as he said, he's making it. And part of his ability to get the work done is what he learned in sports, that whole ability to just work through.
That's great. That's great. And Serena, close us out.
Yeah, so coaching is one of my favorite things to do because I understand the impact. And I understand how much of a difference that could make. When me growing up, I didn't necessarily have that coach pushing me to be my very, very best every single day. And I think back to how things could have been if I did have that. And, now I'm applying to law school in a month. And these kids, these girls that I coach, they're watching me. I'm a role model to them. And so I'm motivated because of them. And I'm passionate because, I feed off of their energy. I know they still follow me on Instagram. They still hit me up. And I know that, I'm so driven to be successful because I want to show them, what that looks like. And, I'm there for them whenever they hit me up and whenever they text me, I immediately reply. And, knowing that I can push them to reach their fullest potential and realize that they do not have any limitations that society imposes on them. They think that, things have to be a certain way. And, I'm passionate about coaching because I can unravel those things that they've already taught themselves. And so, for me to show up and be there for them and, let them realize that they can, just chase after that crazy dream that they have, and they're gonna get there. And to be able to support them and teach them these life skills through sport and be called a coach is literally everything to me. So there's I don't know who I'd be without being a coach. And so with that, I just don't know who I would be without these kids that I've coached. And yeah.
You have a tremendous future ahead of you, and congratulations on law school, because that is amazing, Serena. And for all four of you, really, you do exactly what this panel is, which is coaches who are creating conditions to help kids young women, young men succeed, not just in their sport, but in life. I thank you all, Lisa, Keith, Adam, Serena, for being here today, to the LA84 Foundation and the Play Equity Fund Youth Sports Summit. This has been such an amazing conversation. I have learned so much. I feel very, very inspired. And I always have my own takeaway when I leave something. I always wear a bracelet that has an African proverb that says Ubuntu. And that loosely means we are who we are. I am who I am because of who we are together. So Ubuntu to you. Thank you so much to LA84 once again for doing everything that you do today, tomorrow, and in so many more generations to come. Thanks for watching.
What a great discussion. This concludes the third edition of the 2020 Youth Sports Summit presented by the LA84 Foundation and the Play Equity Fund. Now, our next conversation is scheduled for September 30th, and we'll focus on how we're leveling the playing field for kids and creating pathways to careers in sports.